Hello and welcome to Thoughts in the Green Room with your host, Geoff Mays. This is the interview series, and in studio with me this week, Adam Bailey. Nice. The multi-award-winning theater creator, performer, director, and educator. This man is super talented, ladies and gentlemen. A good friend of mine, a collaborator of mine in the past, and hopefully in the future. And for those of you who don't know him, I could go on for days, but I'm going to only pull out some highlights here. 2017, you created The Life of Henri, and Now Magazine lauded it as an outstanding new play, and it also, that year, was an outstanding production of the Toronto Fringe.
Correct.
How was the show? Did you have a good time?
I had a great time. I got to tour that show across the country. It actually started in 2016 in Edmonton, but we were playing against the Summer Olympics. So it officially started in 2017.
Nice.
When the interesting thing about indie theater is that it doesn't really compete with the Summer Olympics. Also, someone named Gord Downey was having a big concert, and one of our shows played opposite that, so that was fun. So the next year we relaunched the show in Toronto. We retitled it, and it won all these laurels, laudations.
Yeah,
awards.
let's go with laudations.
Laudations?
Yeah.
So what about your awards? And I'm going to stop saying now. It went across the country. We did it in Winnipeg. We did it in Saskatoon, and we returned it to Edmonton, and it got a 5-star review in Edmonton. It was a best of the best in the Saskatoon Fringe. It was a lot of fun, and it was interesting because it was about someone no one knew anything about. This historic painter who was an idiot. Who really thought that he was way more talented and way more famous than he was. He basically did a couple paintings, thought, I'm famous. Didn't didn't check in with anyone to see if he was famous. Just was like, I'm famous. And something that we can all relate to in the arts. And he quits his job at 44 and just is like, okay, that's it. I'm a famous painter. And for the next 20 years, the world said, no, you're not.
And yet,
by the end of the story, all these painters in Hollywood, and not in Hollywood, but close enough, in Paris at the time, decide to have this roast of him. And he wasn't even invited to this roast. They didn't even think he was still around. He kind of faded to the back, or they assumed they were just having fun because his paintings were still in all the dime stores around Paris. They all bought a painting and they're all having a heyday. And they made a little, thing with candles. And he shows up at 64 to this party with all these 20-somethings there. All the very young Picasso, very young Dali, very young Gertrude Stein. They're all drunk and making fun of this guy. And suddenly he's there. And it turns out that he's the dude.
he's the man.
He's the man. He's so chill at the party. He ends up with candle wax all over him. He's playing violin for everyone. They're all like, who is this party animal? And they're all so impressed with him that he actually does become famous. And the weird thing is, in those fading years, he had actually become quite good. Right. So suddenly he's making masterpieces, and he wouldn't have been known had people not decided to make a mockery of him near the end. It's a very strange story, but I thought the world needed to hear it.
And that speaks to the obscenity of this industry in general, right?
Yes.
You wake up one morning and your life is horrible. You wake up the next morning, your life is grand. Vice versa. Your life is grand. You do something wrong, jump on a couch, and all of a sudden you're nothing. Right?
The first meme. Yes. Tom Cruise, why did you do that? Well, someone had to do that, right?
Exactly.
It's 100%. And I did a lot of comparisons of him to other acting, to what it was like acting in the Fringe.
Right.
And I also compared it to Stephen King's Carrie, which either made people love the show or hate it. It also got 2-star reviews.
You're referring to the musical. And when you say...
I compared it to the book, the movie, and the musical. It got his story was filtered through Carrie 7 times over in the show, and people either were like, wow, this guy's really found an interesting way of talking about art history, comparing it to Stephen King. Or they thought, why? How dare you? And I had 1 or 2 reviewers just be like, this person is making a mockery of art history. How dare you?
Which in itself is its own little genius level, in my opinion, because Matisse, right? Henri Matisse, the mockery that led to the fame.
Rousseau,
sorry, not Matisse.
But he's from that time period. But
yes. Henri Rousseau. So, right?
Yeah.
You've got some people lauding you, some people not lauding you. Who knows where it goes, right?
Well, and another interesting thing about that is I actually, just correcting the name there, I had to stop using his full name in my marketing.
Because it was copyright?
No. Because audience members, they don't want to feel like they don't know. even if they're going in for education, like even if they want to know, even if the whole point is, oh, I want to know more about this, that interests me, that intrigues me. If you're flyering someone, if you're handing out posters, if you're advertising something, audiences do not want to feel like they're being spoken down to ever. So saying his name, people would feel like, I don't know enough about this person to come and watch the show. So I had to start saying, this is a play about a fool. And I would never say the person's name until like maybe I would bury it near the end. Yes, Henri Rousseau, and then I would like name off all the people you already knew: Picasso, Dali, blah blah. They're all characters in the show, and I play them all. But I would have to edit him down to next to nothing in the advertisement in the show about him. Like it was a very interesting situation to be in.
The requirement of the hook that actually draws people in.
Yeah,
right.
My sales went down in Winnipeg because I didn't know how to do it properly. And then by the time I got to Saskatoon, I was back to a top show again because I radically rewrote my marketing material. And I was like, because when you're on the road, you're there to make money.
Yes, absolutely. Now this I love that you bring this up, because for everybody out there who watches this, you know, I've got a variety of viewers. Some of them are just people who like to watch me make a fool of myself with my guests. For others, there are people who enjoy the arts and are striving. Some of them are successful. But what you're speaking to, of course, is that push that we have to figure out all the time, especially as theater artists versus being a film artist, right? You've got to come up with the recognition that, hey, come see my show about Henri Rousseau versus come see the show about this painter fool, right?
Yeah.
And this is the stuff, this is the constant reinvention that we as artists need to be doing in order to become successful. Now, speaking of success, I want to bring our audience back to some of this stuff, because this is one of your shows which did very well. I saw the piece, loved the piece. I think I actually saw it twice that Fringe because it was awesome. But highlights, of course, right? In addition to that, in 2016, you created Adam Bailey is on Fire.
Yeah.
Right? A patron's pick that year.
Yeah.
Right? 2014, you wrote and directed the Best of Fringe award-winning show, The Assassination of Rob Ford, Dirty Little Coward, and all of this through your own production company, Still Your Friend. Right? So each year, because we went forwards to backwards, right? Up, 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 pushing and pushing and pushing. Now, this is just Fringe. You have a history before Fringe, and I'm sure there are other shows in Fringe years gone by, right?
Yeah, I've directed for other people in Fringes, and I've had other touring. Like, there's one that I've buried in there, Adult Baby Cupid, which is a cabaret creation that I did that I brought to the Fringe one year. But no, I have a Fringe-focused career right now.
Right now.
Which is a really unique thing in Canada. People come from around the world to tour the Canadian Fringe circuit. This is something that people in Toronto seem to be unaware of. But the Canadian Fringe circuit, which started in Edmonton, and that's still the largest Fringe in the country, they then decided to start a Fringe in Victoria. That's the second oldest Fringe in the country. And they thought it would be nice because then people from Edmonton who did the Fringe circuit maybe go to Victoria. And then they did...
Not too far.
And then they built Winnipeg. And so over time what's happened is there's a Fringe circuit like the old vaudeville circuit, and it runs East Coast to West Coast across the country. And people come from as far away as Australia and South Africa to do the circuit professionally, and that is their summer income. Sometimes they're so good at it that becomes their annual income. I know people who spend their entire winter in creation process and their summer doing the Fringe circuit, which now starts in Orlando and then goes up to Montreal and then across Canada. And that's how people do the Fringe. And they can make mad cow on doing the Fringe circuit, which is something like in Toronto, we don't see the Fringe that way.
No, we don't. You were saying earlier, and I agree with you, that Toronto sees a Fringe as an opportunity to showcase your work and possibly to get a leg up in order to maybe get another larger company pick you up so you get a season here or a show that's running in a major theater.
Yeah, Toronto's where you start the Drowsy Shop Round. Yeah. I'm going to do the Drowsy Shop Round. I'm going to do My Mother's Lesbian Jewish Wiccan Wedding. I'm going to do something like that. And then Mervish is going to pick it up. And maybe we'll get on Broadway, or maybe, Soul Pepper will do it, and but there's a whole different tier of Fringe shows that goes across the country that's designed specifically to be a hit in 1 hour. That's a very different style of show.
Right.
And if you're ever lucky enough to be on the prairies when one of these things is happening, there are some people who actually do the tour and skip Toronto because Toronto isn't as friendly to touring companies, because it seems strange to have a professional level show drop in to a Toronto Fringe when it's supposed to be a showcase of new work. The audience has internalized that concept of it being new work.
Right.
You go to Winnipeg and you see TJ Daw, who is a film writer out in Vancouver, who also does the Fringe circuit in the summer. but he produces his own work is very poetic and for brainy, smartsy people, and then he also produces people like Charlie Ross who do one-man Star Wars, one-man Batman, one-man Avengers,
Right.
and those are giant hits. Like if you go to Winnipeg and he's at the Fringe, he's selling tickets. That is what he is doing. That is what he is there for. And if he came to Toronto and did the Fringe, people would boycott him. The people would be mad
Right.
at him for being here. He's something that we want to see the Mirvishes put on at the Panasonic in Toronto.
Right.
He's not someone that we expect to see at the beer tent at the Fringe.
That's so odd that we're such an anomalous beast within the Fringe, but on the other side of it, you know, we're still Hollywood North, right?
Yes.
Everybody's coming here for film and all that level of work. It's interesting being an artist, and I'm curious about this, and I'm going to come back to some of these other accolades that you've got, but I'm curious. What's it like being a theater artist in Toronto? Because I truly believe that it's a different beast here than any other city.
Well, it's interesting because we have a strong theater scene for a place like Hollywood North. Like LA, a couple years back, there was a fight with American Actors Equity and the actors in LA because they didn't want to have to get paid to do stage work. Because for them, that was just resume building. Their real work was film. And there was a fight with Equity that Equity was like, no, you have an equity card. You have to demand payment. That is what it means to be part of a union.
Right.
What is wrong with you? And the LA actors are like, yeah, but I'm just part of this union in case I get road work. But while I'm in LA, if I do something on stage, I just want my agent to come and see it. And like, no, this is not why we're doing this. And there was they wanted an exception for low-level stage work in LA. And in Toronto, that doesn't happen.
No.
There's a like Tony Napo who does a lot of not just SOC, but he gets lines on camera in American films.
Yeah.
But he is a stage treasure in Toronto as well, and that's a unique thing in the city of Toronto because usually you have to go and audition in LA to get a speaking line in a Toronto fit.
Right.
But Tony Napo somehow manages to get he's managed that gap, and he also gets a lot of main stage work. So I think that's an anomaly because our stage scene is not as big as London or New York's. So It's not like you're doing a Broadway show. Yeah. You're doing a show at the Tarragon. That's a 220-seat house.
Yep.
But it's still work that people are proud of doing, and the people who do it, like it's a very strong part of the city. I don't know if that explains what theater is like here.
I don't know if it explains what theater is like here either, but it definitely speaks to something that I see as very distinct. You're right. New York, London, big, huge theater scenes, big theaters, like the grandstands, thousands of people in a house. And yeah, we've got the Mirvish Place. We've got the Princess of Wales and what used to be the Pantages. I can't think of the names of them right now.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple big houses, but the real theater scene, in my opinion, is our Tarragon, our Can Stage, our Factory, Soul Pepper, right? That small house, which is comparatively, it's independent theater against the Mirvish Panasonic, the Mirvish Princess of Wales.
Yeah.
Right? But that's what's the stronger vibe. Now, I think there might be a little slowly becoming a shift in that. Slowly. Very slowly. But I still say that our beast of the city is the independent theater. Right?
Yeah, the Americans will sometimes say, like, they're shocked at how long Canadians' resumes can become because also shows aren't designed to run indefinitely in Toronto.
3 weeks.
So it's at the house we're talking about a little bit longer than that, but like they're subscription houses.
Yes.
Right. So that's the difference in Toronto is that unlike New York, where your show's a success if it runs for a year, Toronto, your show's a success if it gets its sales in a subscription series. So people buy subscriptions to a theater, and you see 5 or 6 shows a year at that theater company, and they have to curate and make them all different and make them all enjoyable if you buy a subscription. And that's the real base of theater goers in Toronto, which also means that it's more for locals than it is for tourists.
Agreed.
Which is another difference between London and New York.
Yes, it's a tour. It's everybody who's there sees it, but it's also designed to draw in people. It's part of an active part versus an inactive, not inactive, that's the wrong word, a very active part of their tourism and drawing people into the city and keeping the city moving. And that happens here, but it's not as overt.
Yeah, the shows that do well here in the big houses are things that get school tours. So like, you're not going to see someone do a really gaudy, gauche main stage show like in a 500-seat house or a 1,000-seat house in Toronto, because school buses.
That's right.
That is where you want the money. Where in New York and London, yeah, you are going to have some giant shows that are definitely intended just for an adult audience. When we got August Osage County here, it was considered to be a really big get because it's not a Toronto audience show, and the Mirvishes brought the original cast from New York to Toronto when they did their tour, because it's a 3-story house on stage. To do their production, you needed a space the size as the Pantages.
Absolutely.
And making a Toronto audience understand why it was valuable that we got that was a difficult thing, because usually things at the Pantages are Phantom of the Opera with a very slow falling chandelier, so kids in grade 6 don't get frightened.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? When I saw Phantom of the Opera, I was so bored at the chandelier falling. I never thought I would be that bored by a chandelier falling. I was in grade 8, and I was at the age that they were trying to make me not scared. And I was like, oh my God. Then again, when I saw Beauty and the Beast, I got to see the little kids scared of the ballerina wolves that attacked Beast, and they were the least scary ballerina wolves ever. Truly. But when you're doing family theater, you really have to think about what will terrify the young ones, and apparently men in
tights and wolf costumes.
Wolf-ish costumes attacking Beast. That's scary.
But I think you're right, though. Like our major Toronto scene isn't designed to run something and draw in crowds. It's designed to last long enough to get the school buses in and out. And when that's done, we roll into the next show, whether we're touring it in or whether we're producing it ourselves here. Yeah. Which makes surviving as a theater artist in this city very challenging, because you need to get in and become one of those regular calls, regular casts within the houses.
In a weird way, that makes it like TV.
In very, very much so like TV in that weird way.
Because there's a Tony Napo type now. I need to cast Tony Napo. You can't cast Tony Napo. Okay, I need a Tony Napo type. And suddenly you're doing that for the stage, right? As opposed to doing it for TV, where you can, okay, Sheldon's mom. Who is Sheldon's mom going to be? Like, anytime you see a cast of a new sitcom, and at some point their parents are going to have to show up, and you start pre-casting their parents in your head, wondering, who are they going to cast for that person? Will it be Margot Kidder? Will it be, which fading celebrity will get that chance? Yes. Or Laurie Metcalf, who's just fantastic, and she's not fading, and she deserves an Oscar. Laurie Metcalf, get an Oscar.
And you're absolutely right. And I find that very, what's the word? I think it's awesome, because it means there's an ongoing industry, but at the same time it creates, in many ways, in my opinion, it creates a limiting factor for the industry, because the industry is saying that we're not willing to take risks and put up that show that might be different and run for years.
Yeah, I mean, it happens in these smaller houses, but once again, those are for locals. So how do we
branch that out, right? And you've got experience with crazy and gauche and off-the-wall stuff when it comes down to your cabaret. Am I right?
Yeah, I do have a career at Lunacy Cabaret, so I do a lot of crazy and gauche things.
And you spoke earlier about adult Baby Cupid, and I saw...
We might have edited that out of that, because we started this 3 times.
We may have. So we'll bring this back in. We've got adult Baby Cupid, which I've seen, which is exactly what it sounds like. An adult Baby Cupid. And...
It's me.
It's him. And Adam takes...
Hello! I mean, no, he's not here. I can't say his voice right now.
And Adam takes a no-holds-barred approach on everything with his character. And just rips into it. And it's wonderful to watch. And this is something about your work in general. I've seen a lot of your shows. I've worked with you before. And as much as you tear into stuff and you rip it apart, you're always poignant. It's not ripping things apart for the sake of ripping them apart and being a horrible person. You're doing things that are poignant, that make a statement, that get people thinking, and that's provocative, which I think is one of the great values that theater hands to an audience more so than film hands to an audience. It's a bit of a generalization, obviously, but I think that in the work I've seen you do, this is an underlying theme of your work, of challenging something, challenging the man, if you will, or anything else that is topic for your thought process, and getting your audience thinking. And that idea, you do it with all your work, but your foundation, you have to correct me if I'm wrong here, your foundation sits in the cabaret, in the buffon, in the clown.
Yes. When I graduated from theater school, I'm an odd type. We were talking about this too. We were talking about getting hired as a gay man, especially because it was 2000, right? There wasn't the rules for queer artists that there are now,
Right.
And so the first company that hired me, and I kind of became a jack of all trades for that company, was the Shameless Dames. And so that was a mostly female, a 95% female company that did burlesque and comedy burlesque and agitprop, which is a fancy term for like challenging the system, very political burlesque with plots and musical numbers and all this stuff. And I ended up writing for them, directing scenes, acting in it, producing. I ended up doing a lot of work for that company. Right. And it was a fantastic experience, but it definitely put me, after like 4 years of theater school and getting an agent in Toronto and all this stuff, and not being able to like be cast properly in anything other than background on Queer as Folk. Suddenly I was in this thing, but cabaret at that time in Toronto was thriving, but also to the side of theater. So I was suddenly despite my training, had made myself an outsider artist, which was a really unique, weird, wonderful thing to have done. But then I had to figure out how to smart my way back into the front door, which was a challenge, you know.
And I'm sure it is, and I imagine that's where a lot of the Fringe stuff comes in, is working that way in. Now, I want to talk about some of your cabaret for a little bit, because one of the things that I've seen in this city right now, we're speaking about those smaller indie theaters, right, against the few larger production houses that we've got that'll bring in the big touring shows. I think cabaret is becoming a prominent side stream of theater in this city.
In all cities.
In all cities.
Yeah, that's cabaret
it's rising.
Cabaret rising. It had a rise in the early 2000s, and then it kind of, I think, fell back a bit because I think the format got a little stale for people. People were doing very similar things repeatedly, and if you start breaking the mold, because people started realizing there was a career in it, and I think the people who were doing successful wanted to make sure that it had a foundation. I know that as a member of the Shameless Dames, because we were doing very different stuff, we ran into that a lot. A lot of the women who were doing burlesque in a more traditional or burlesque revival way were kind of upset with us doing a very ham hock thing that was much more political. Nowadays, if you did what we did, we would be standard.
Right.
Like in 2019, what we were doing in the Shameless Dames would be a little bit less than standard. Even, we'd be like, oh yeah, okay, I see you've politicized some burlesque stuff. Great, good for you.
But this is
all political now.
Yeah. But this is growth, right?
It's growth, and what's interesting is it's now because of things like Drag Race and there's just so many factors, but I think Drag Race is a huge one. The burlesque scene, the cabaret scene has become a real side stream, not a side stream, but like a real stream of theater that people are like willing to look at and take more professionally. Right. Like, and then see those people as having resumes. Like Shameless Dames was something that I was told to not put on my resume by certain people.
Now
it's something that's definitely highlighting because the Toronto Star said we were one of the top ones in the city. CBC covered us nationally because of some of the shows that we did. Like we're not a kidding around burlesque company, but now it's back on my resume because it's not something that I have to be like, oh yeah, I took my clothes off sometimes to get an audience. And we were selling to 500 and plus seats a night when we were doing that show. It wasn't a small show. Yeah,
which is awesome. And you're speaking about seeing on the cusp of a movement that has now become very popular.
Yeah.
Right. I've got 20 years ago, I couldn't speak to anybody that I knew at that time who was doing a cabaret or burlesque show, and now I've got a handful of friends, more than a handful of friends. I got a list of friends because everybody's doing it, right?
Yeah.
And it's again, speaking that independent movement within Toronto and the challenges of Toronto, it's this thing that is easily accessible. You can align yourself, you can create, and you can get it out there, and you can be performing, you can be entertaining, you can draw in audience and enjoy the craft that we do. A little bit of a different stream than maybe your traditional drama or traditional comedy, but still be out performing, doing your thing and expressing. And, you know, as you say, politicizing and making a comment and being engaging with an audience.
It's so political and in wonderful ways. And sometimes because, I mean, there's a level of offense that you can play with in cabaret, and that's an edgy thing right now. Offense is edgy, which is a strange thing to say. But like, when we were doing the Dames, my pronouns are we and are because I'm a queen. No, my pronouns are he and him. But I think that's a wonderful joke. Back in the day, I know I'm old. Back in the day,
yeah, we're not that old.
But a shift happened around offense, which is kind of interesting because offense, no matter what you're doing, was kind of a liberal thing for a really long time because the people who were offended were by nature conservatives. It was like they were the easy ones to offend and liberals were hard to offend. So anything you did that was kind of offensive, like South Park was kind of de facto liberal.
Right.
And now because of edgelords and trolls and all these like the culture has shifted, so the nature of being provocative or creating offense has shifted to a naturally conservative place, which I didn't think that was humanly possible. But
but it did.
But it did.
It did.
I'm like,
somehow
oh,
managed it.
wow. And it's interesting to look at people whose careers are based on being provocative and how they've managed that. Whether it's Trey Parker and Matt Stone being like, no, we're still going to just do it the same way we always have, or someone like RuPaul like constantly learning lessons and changing words that they felt they could use in the past and can't use now, and slowly for some people, but for other people just right. It's an interesting thing to see someone, because RuPaul was provocative. Like the whole point of having RuPaul in anything was that shocked people.
Absolutely.
And RuPaul got cast playing Jan Brady's therapist in the Brady Bunch movie. Like RuPaul was, but that was shocking at that time. Now, not so much.
Not so much now.
Yeah.
And so, for those of you who haven't yet picked up on this, Adam is an exceptionally informed theater creator, right? If you haven't noticed, right? And this, of course, comes from the fact that not only have you been on stage with your burlesque, your clown, you've been the co-artistic director of the Toronto Festival of Clowns.
Yes.
Yes. The Shameless Stains, which you've just been speaking about, Adult Baby Cupid, and Lunacy Cabaret. Like
Lunacy Crap. That is the
I love
If you've
Lunacy.
ever been to the Lunacy Cabaret, Lunacy Crap. That can
sums it up. No,
I mean that's another one that sells to like 500 seats a night. But like it's
crazy.
It's sort of. It's almost like the Apollo in Toronto for white people. It's such a weird thing to compare it to, but. The heckling community has dropped away. It used to be, back when we were at the center of gravity, people would get heckled if their act wasn't interesting enough, and get like, I remember sometimes Sketchy the Clown picking up acts and carrying them off the stage. And now that never happens now that we're at the Opera House. There's a little bit of heckling, but it's not the way it used to be. Also, the quality acts might have gotten a little bit better.
And things grow and things change. Now, I want to bring us back around, because we spoke about Fringe, we spoke about Cabaret, the influence of both in the city, and I viewed you for many years, and I still do, as a primarily, whether this is the truth or not, it's an aspect of you for sure, as a creator.
Yes.
Right? You create, you bring your stuff to life, you make a market for yourself, and you, as I said to the audience out there already, you bring and you pick stuff apart with strong, poignant message.
Yes.
Your current show, which is going to be touring where?
Winnipeg, Saskatoon, and Edmonton.
Is Franz Ferdinand Must Die.
He must.
He must. You've created this piece. Tell us a little bit about it as we start to wrap ourselves up here for the evening. And what is Franz Ferdinand Must Die?
It's a solo play. Once again, my work is usually hard to categorize, so that you'll watch it and you'll be like, is this a one... What? Okay, so yeah, it's a solo play that takes the story of Franz Ferdinand, who is the Archduke who got killed. That started World War I. I got curious about that incident. I mean, I've always been fascinated with it because it's a mistake that he got killed, right? Like the assassination was a failure until it wasn't a failure, right? Like he survives his one assassination only due to a series of improbable coincidences later in the day, bump back into one of his assassins and then get assassinated.
Right.
It's ridiculous. And I was really curious. I have always been fascinated by that event. But then on top of it, with the shift in the culture, and we're sort of in a pre-revolutionary state right now. There's something going on in the culture, and
everybody is angst-ridden and antsy against the Dofo and against the Trump.
Yeah,
it's prevalent. Where something is shifting. There's an undercurrent that's different now.
When both right and left in the culture become protectionist, that's usually a sign. Like when the center goes away, that's usually a sign that you're in a a possible state where revolution or war can happen.
I agree with you.
And so I was very interested in that. I was interested in the unintended consequences of political violence, because the person who killed Franz Ferdinand was not trying to start World War I. He was actually trying to unify his nation against a foreign colonizing oppressor. And at the same time, he's also a bit of an incel. And I was really curious as to what sways someone, because this person can easily still be viewed as like a leftist student activist or a right-wing incel nationalist. Like, his story actually sits really uncomfortably on top of those two things. And I, of course, love people who don't categorize well, because it forces the audience to have to really think about, how does that happen? Where do we go from here? Because especially when it's a real person and you're like, wait, then it's like, because you sit there in your discomfort, like, and you have to sit in your discomfort, which is a great leftist term, actually, and really question, how do we get into these situations and how do we get back out of them? Because the person who killed Franz Ferdinand, Gavrilo Princip, was swayed by other people. And I think you can see in the show that there's different people swaying him at different times. And for the audience, I guess the question is, how do you sway people?
Right. Which, of course, comes back to that major point of your created work, and all the work that you've done that I've seen challenges the audience in a powerful and poignant way. Now, that's all we've got now, but I've enjoyed this.
I've enjoyed it.
It goes
went by
crazy,
too fast.
Right?
Be interviewed by Geoff. It's amazing.
Watch one of his shows. They're amazing. We won't see Franz Ferdinand in this Toronto Fringe, but I hope, as you've done in the past, when you come back from the tour, you'll mount it for a couple nights somewhere. So that
more than a couple nights. We're looking at... It'll be here for more than a couple nights.
Good. So when that comes out, I'll make sure I put a shout out to it. But when you come back, I'd like to have you back on the show. And I want to talk about what it's like to be a theater creator and what it's like to generate your own work and move from there and have that discussion with you, because that would be a lot of fun.
Excellent.
Game for it?
I'm totally game for it. This was fantastic. Thank
Wonderful.
you so much, Geoff.
Ladies and gentlemen, these are your thoughts from the Green Room, the interview series with special guest in studio, Adam Bailey. We will see you in a couple of weeks.